Sure, a Russian general has just been bumped off. Not to put too fine a point on it. He's done some pretty nasty stuff in the past, so you might argue it serves him right, but let's dig a bit deeper. Why do you think it happened, and maybe why now?
Yeah, so Igor Krylov, who's a lieutenant general, 3-star Russian in charge of sort of nuclear, biological, and chemical capability in Russia. Tuesday morning, first thing in the morning, he was leaving his residential apartment with his aide, and there was a loud explosion. 300 grams of what's believed to be TNT hidden in an electric bike exploded and killed both the general and his aide. Now, he was already indicted as being a war criminal by Kyiv, and there were suggestions that the Ukrainian Special Service had commissioned his death. It happened literally only 24 hours after the Ukrainians had, in absentia, charged this general with some war crimes. And by way of example, we don't hear much about chemical weapons use in the war in Ukraine.
Which is surprising.
It is surprising. Part of it, I suspect, is just the nature of the quantities and what type and the like. But just by putting it into context, we're not talking about one or two here. We're talking about nearly 5,000.
Yeah. That's big news. That ought to be the number one topic on a classic media broadcast.
I agree. So doing something like that, which is, it's illegal. Trouble is with chemical weapons is they're completely indiscriminate. So, they'll kill just as many civilians, babies, children as they will soldiers. One of the reasons why they've been banned. So this individual getting taken out looks like a bit of a bad guy. There's some other details, though, coming out as we go, as we record this, one of which is that apparently it's an Uzbek has been captured. You can imagine this is only 4 miles away from the center of the Kremlin. So CCTV everywhere. Russia will have had no difficulty finding, who put the bike there and backtracking it. And they've now apparently got an Uzbek that is 29 years old, apparently is admitted to doing it, admitted that he was paid $100,000 by the Ukrainians to do it.
Really?
Yeah. That apparently, they had a rental car nearby with a camera set up inside it so that they could see when the general left his apartment, then use that to trigger the bombs. There's lots of different indications coming out. I have to say, when I first heard the story, I was incredibly skeptical about it because, really, if this was Ukraine trying to take out a single general, it's very risky. Is it Russia trying to take out a general because he stepped out of line? Generally, they take a bit of a jump out of a hotel window, don't they, rather than explosion.
Yeah, because you're going to catch other people, aren't you? But I know. I did actually see a film of this. I saw the two of them coming out of the hotel. Didn't see the bike going off, but I saw the aftermath. And, it was clearly, 300 grams, I don't know, doesn't look much, but actually did a hell of a lot of damage.
Yeah, you don't have to be that close to it to die, but obviously it depends on what it was packed around, if it's ball bearings or stuff like that as well. But I do think, what's interesting, I think, is that he's been taken out, but I think this will be more embarrassing to Putin than one might at first imagine. By all accounts, the elite in Moscow are largely protected from the war. By all accounts, the conscription tends not to focus on the landed gentry in Moscow and tends to be more focused at the people living in the provinces and out in the countryside. And therefore, Muscovites are largely going around their business as normal. But every now and again, a Ukrainian drone gets into to Moscow, and that attracts attention. Now you've got an explosion happening, taking out a senior general. That will always remind Muscovites that they are involved in a war, and that will be unsettling for Putin.
Yeah. Well, you say it won't look good for Putin, sort of embarrassing. A scalp back home in Ukraine, if that's where it all started, looks good. It'll put everybody on notice as well, when life will just be a bit harder for people of any seniority.
Yeah, and I think I think for me, all of it, there's always a question of, this isn't the first time that Ukraine has taken out an individual. I think it's about the fourth occasion over the last 2.5, 3 years they've done something like this. The question is why, because it would have taken a hell of a lot of planning. It's very likely the individual that does it is going to get caught. God only knows what sort of pain and suffering they go through, when they're caught. So what's the actual objective? And part of it at the moment, I suspect, is that both sides are manoeuvring towards that 20th of January deadline when Trump is inaugurated. Putin, despite it being in the middle of winter, is pushing really hard on the front line. We've got loads of reports this week about North Koreans dying in huge numbers. Why? Because apparently they're just running around in groups on the battlefield, which just sounds tragic, which provides a really easy target for the Ukrainians.
A turkey shoot.
I know, and but all of it, it's the middle of winter. There's no foliage, so it's very difficult for anybody to hide. It's difficult to dig a trench because it's all solid. So the casualties, just surviving is difficult enough normally. All of this appears to be to get yourself in the best position possible for negotiation, and therefore taking out a general and just unsettling the Muscovites a bit might just again change the appetite back in Moscow for maybe being more supportive of the efforts to negotiate an end to this conflict.